Hello and welcome to Computer Tech and More. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Arctic P12 ARGB version. This is part of my redone series where I redid all of the noise testing analysis on every single fan. First we're going to do a little bit of an explanation, and then we're going to go over the new versus the old data, and then detailed explanation. So let's get right into it. So first, I want to say my previous analysis is not completely invalid. It just wasn't testing what I wanted to test. And I found that out after I tested like 50 fans. So basically the old testing analysis is a case very similar to if you had a mesh filter directly over top of the fan, or you had the fan in a pull configuration over a radiator or AIO. Mind, every radiator is different, so it depends on how close the fins in the radiator are to the fan blades themselves, where it causes an interference. So thus the fan operates in a louder type scenario. So it isn't just the fact that I placed the fan very close to the fan blades themselves. Now the reason for this original analysis was because I'm in a fairly noisy environment, i.e. my office, and it's steadily over 32 decibels in noise volume. New testing analysis, I'm paying much closer attention to what the ambient noise level in the room is to make sure it's within a 2 decibel range so that it's ultra consistent. And I'm also using a pole fixed distance, so there's going to be a pole between the microphone and the fan, so I always have the exact same measurement every single time. So the previous testing analysis, every fan I run through a pass of like 3 times. Well, not like 3 times, 3 times. And then I average the results. And this is true for the airspeed measurements as well, so that I'm able to generate a range. Previous analysis was plus or minus 4 decibels. That is an 8 decibel range, which is actually kind of a lot because every 10 decibels is a doubling in noise volume. The new testing analysis, because I'm paying much closer attention, is giving me a plus or minus 2 decibel range. So that is a 4 decibel range. That is a lot better. But unfortunately, this is where I dead end in what I'm able to do at my current channel size. In order to get the next level, I need help from viewers like you, or sponsorship, or YouTube, because I want to get a better dedicated microphone for noise testing. That's $200 something. I want to get a better, more accurate anemometer, something that can get me the accuracy of 0.01 meter per second rather than 0.1 meter per second. That's like $500. I want to build a little test system. Nothing doesn't need to be fancy. I want to build a little test chamber. So just to enclose my current testing size, to just block out ambient room noise, hopefully dropping it by 5 to 10 decibels. That would be ideal. And all in all, it's like $2,000. I'm not saying that I'm going to stop reviewing if you guys don't fund me. It just means that I'm limited. I'll keep doing things the way I'm doing them right now until I finally reach that threshold point, and then can upgrade my whole testing suite, and I'll redo all of my fan testing all over again with the new and improved setup. So I just want to give that little bit of an explanation there because, well, it does matter to me. So if you like what I'm doing, I ask that you join me on Patreon, or at least hit that subscribe button. Anything can help, and we'll just keep going. Now, as for, excuse me, I do have a little bit of a cold. What we're taking a look at. So if you're new to this channel, I do recommend that you go to the second half of the video where I go over all the detailed analysis and the graphs and all that kind of stuff, and explaining the nitty-gritty of what my actual review process is. If you're returning and you're familiar with my graphs and my charts and my data, you can just watch this brief overview where I'll just be comparing the data points for the fans. So this is all the 120 millimeter class fans that I've tested. It does not include the 140, so I separated the two classes just to simplify the view that we're taking a look at. And this one we're actually taking a look at the ZF 120025 Pastel, as well as the P12 ARGB. On these basically just data tables, we got the new, the old, the rank, the model, the RPM, and the performance that it was achieving. Also, at 100% PWM fan signaling, we have one additional column, and that's the noise level it was generating. All right, let's get into it. First up is CPU AirCooler testing. Noise normalized. The P12 ARGB was ranked 34. It is now ranked 16th. The Pastel was ranked 25th and retains that position at 100% PWM fan signaling. The P12 ARGB was ranked 32nd and retains that position, and the Pastel was ranked 22nd and retains that position. In cooler testing, noise normalized value proposition, the P12 ARGB was ranked 27th. It is now ranked 11th. The Pastel was ranked 8th. It is now ranked 7th. CPU cooler value proposition 100% PW fan signaling. The P12 ARGB was ranked 19th and retains that position. The Pastel was ranked 10th and retains that position. CFM testing noise normalized. The P12 ARGB was ranked 35th. It is now ranked 11th. The Pastel was ranked 16th. It is now ranked 18th. CFM testing 100% PW fan signaling. The P12 ARGB was ranked 22nd and retains that position. The Pastel was ranked 12th and retains that position. CFM value proposition noise normalized. The P12 ARGB was ranked 24th. It is now ranked 10th. The Pastel was ranked 6th and retains that position. 100% PW fan signaling. CFM test. The P12 ARGB was ranked 16th and retains that position. The Pastel was ranked 6th and retains that position. Case simulation test, 6-inch mark, noise normalized. The P12 ARGB was ranked 43rd. It is now ranked 23rd. And the Pastel was ranked 33rd and is now ranked 36th. The case simulation test, noise normalized, 11-inch mark. The P12 ARGB was ranked 30th. It is now ranked 14th. The Pastel was ranked 37th. It is now ranked 38th. 6-inch mark, value proposition, noise normalized. The P12 ARGB was ranked 32nd. It is now ranked 15th. The Pastel was ranked 17th. It is now ranked 12th. The 11-inch mark, noise normalized, case simulation test, value proposition. The P12 ARGB was ranked 29th. It is now ranked 9th. And the Pastel was ranked 30th and is now ranked 23rd. So I want to bring up one keynote about Arctic's fans. And between the original and the new testing, I did acquire a new sample, so I was not able to retest the original sample. This leads me to believe that Arctic has just a wider variance in quality control for their fans, meaning that the difference between one fan and the other has a wider variation in terms of their noise quality, not their actual performance, because I retested that and then compared the results. Their speed was always consistent, but the noise level between the fans did vary quite a bit more, because I did briefly retest a bunch of these fans in the original testing methodology as well. So there's just a wider variance within Arctic fans. So you have a higher likelihood of getting a lemon with that brand than you are with like a brand from like Noctua. I just want to give that explanation. Ones where I feel like I got particularly bad results, I'm planning on getting a second sample to then retest to check quality control with that, because I also had the similar issue with Cooler Master. All right, let's get into the specific graphs and the details and the data. So first up with the detailed graphs is the case simulation test. The case simulation test can be looked at a couple key different ways, and first and foremost, the most important for you, the viewer, is how good is this fan at the case size that I actually plan on buying or am currently using. So I took key measurement points at the 6, the 9, the 11, and the 14.5 inch marks. Now this distance isn't the size of the case. This is the distance from the front of the fan, or the front fans, to the rough position of your CPU socket, because you want the maximum airspeed hitting your air cooler. So this type of testing is both for case testing as well as air-cooled system testing. So the 6-inch mark is representative of your small form factor cases, something that is probably an ITX motherboard in a small form factor case. Now, not the ultra compact ones. This is a front to back airflow type design. I can't think of anything specifically, but I do believe that NZXT makes one of this type of design, and I know that there are other ones on the market. I just don't remember their model numbers. But the 6-inch mark is also representative of a short throw distance, meaning you have fans in the bottom of your case and you're blowing them up towards your GPU. So you're having that airflow from the bottom of the case toward the top of your case, or at least to your GPU. And then for inverted cases, it would be the top fans blowing down into your GPU, just for that sort of case scenario. The 9-inch mark is representative of your compact towers, something that would hold a full ATX motherboard or a MATX, so they're the same length, and the GPU would probably be about the same length as your motherboard, and it would be in front-to-back airflow type design like that. The 11-inch mark is representative of your compact or mid-tower cases, something like the Corsair 550D, old Corsair 500 series, the Meshify 2C or Meshify C, whatever the current nomenclature is from Fractal Design. Basically just your standard bog mid-tower cases. Then you have the 14.5 inch mark. This is representative of your large tower, something like the Fractal Design Torrent would be sitting in that size category. So you do want to spec out a fan that is properly positioned for the size case that you actually plan on using. So the reason that all this is important is, how does a fan work? First and foremost, the fan accelerates air through it. In order for the air to accelerate through it, you need to be pulling a small vacuum in front of the fan for the air to be drawn into it. So to allow this fan to operate more efficiently, so assume you've got your CPU air cooler over here, you need a good high quality fan in the front to supply this fan with the air and as much air as possible, so that it's not really pulling a vacuum. The front fan is actually supplying this fan with air rather than it pulling a vacuum. And even though in effect it's doing the exact same thing, but it allows this fan to operate much more efficiently and effectively, and thus improving overall airflow through your case and dropping your temperatures. Now, if you are using an AIO and you have that in the front position on your case, you still want high quality airflow going through it. But first, a little bit of an explanation. Heatsink or radiator, if you have the fan in a push configuration, so you've got the fan in front and then the radiator behind it, the radiator will naturally straighten out the airflow, improving the quality of the airflow once it exits the device, but it will be at a higher temperature. But let's say your GPU is air-cooled. You want to make sure that the airflow going through your case is still fast enough and enough airflow is traveling through it to keep your GPU temperatures low. So this is why you still want to make sure you have high quality fans if you have at least one component that is air-cooled. If everything is water-cooled, then you've shifted around where everything is. And if you have a top mount radiator, so sort of like a chimney effect, you still want good quality fans for airflow to get through your case, especially to get to your GPU. But you're basically sucking the air out and kind of changes the way things interact. If you're interested in me doing a video with that sort of analysis, please leave it down below. I would certainly enjoy putting one together, but I need to know if there's enough interest in it at this time for me to devote my time resources into making that sort of content. If the fans are in a pull configuration, like Linus from Linus Tech Tips likes talking about, for easy cleaning, you do want to make sure that you've got high quality fan in that pull configuration so that the airflow pattern coming out of the fan is good. So again, air-cooled GPU, because the airflow coming out of the fan will match whatever is in the graphs. So I'm of the opinion that you always want to get a high quality fan no matter how you're using it in the case, one with a good concentrated airflow, but I do understand that that is not realistic for everybody because we all have limited monetary resources, and it's up to us to determine how we want to use that monetary resources. So I'm here to present the data as best as I can see it and try to limit my overall opinion about things. So if you have this fan, any fan in a pull configuration at the back end of your heatsink, the airflow pattern coming out of it doesn't quite matter as much as long as you've got good exhaust out the case. So I have the Fractal Design Torrent, and it's a very open back, so it doesn't much matter for my set of circumstances. But if you have a much more enclosed case, just a good exhaust fan to pull the air out, because the air is going to travel in the direction of wherever it feels the negative pressure or path of least resistance. So in a pull configuration at the back end of your case doesn't much matter, but but the airflow at the front of your case really does matter. So you want to make sure that you've got a good airflow going through it. And last note, in a total radiator system, you've separated out your heat generating components to the edges of your case, so top, bottom, whatever. So the airflow pattern in the case doesn't matter as much because you basically moved where the heat generating components are. And the motherboard temperatures and stuff don't vary quite as much as the heat generating components like the CPU and the GPU. But in my opinion, you might as well still get good airflow fans, because then in future builds you can reuse it if you decide to stop going radiator or whatever. So what does this mean? So poor quality fans or poorly designed fans would drop off to zero very quickly, indicating that they tend to spread out the airflow very widely. So I'm drawing it with the mouse cursor. Higher quality fans with a good concentrated airflow will create a very straight pattern with very little airspeed loss. So we're seeing two very different pictures here. where the P12 tends to be flatter, while the Pastel tends to drop off much more quickly. But let's go into this in a little bit more detail. So over here we have noise normalized results, airspeed versus distance, and this is versus my control fan primarily. My control fan is 3 parts A12X5 to 1 part A14. 140 millimeter class, like the A14, tend to do better at the 11 14.5 inch mark, while smaller 120 millimeter class fans tend to do better at the 6 and 9 inch marks. So by blending the two fans together, I hope to create a quote-unquote perfect fan, or at least a fan that is sort of idealized as the fan to beat. So this blue line is the regular P12. Then we have the red line is the P12 ARGB sitting a bit below my control fan. Then we have the Bionics P120. We have the Bionics ARGB version, and we have the Pastel sitting at the lowest position. So even though the P12 ARGB and P12 share basically the same name, they do have different blade designs, meaning that the ARGB one has a disc around the fan blades, and it is clear that it isn't quite performing as well as the regular P12. How about at 100% PW fan signaling? Well, the control fan is sitting right here. It's sort of in the top position, except for at longer distances, where the regular P12 is outperforming it. And the ARGB version is sitting underneath my control fan, while the Pastel is in the lowest position overall. So the ARGB one versus the regular one, the ARGB just isn't quite as high performing, despite having actually a faster RPM than the regular P12. And how does it compare to other fans I've tested? So this is a small subsample selection. So right here, this green line is the Wonder Snail. I consider this the bottom end of the good fans. And not for the 6-inch mark, not for the 9-inch mark. It's for the 11 and 14.5 inch mark. If you see right over there, it's actually performing really close to the top end fans. It just has a particularly good airflow design, which is why I consider it the bottom end of the quote good fans. So the P12 ARGB sort of sits over top of the Wonder Snail at the 6, the 9, and the 11 inch mark, but by 14.5 inches, it does lose performance. So you want to be careful of how you're going to use it in your computer case. As for the Pastel, it's not performing particularly well in this noise normalized results. It's sitting right towards the bottom of the graphs. At 100% PWM fan signaling, well, the ARGB is below what I'd call a good fan. So that's a little bit unfortunate. And the Pastel would be considered a very poor performer overall, well off the good fan category. Now, we have noise results. So this is the 9-inch mark. The 9-inch mark was chosen because fans that tend to, well, let me give a little bit of explanation first. So I need an airspeed over 0.5 meters per second. My anemometer, current anemometer, it's only able to pick up airspeeds over 0.3 meters per second. So for consistency's sake, I need airspeeds over 0.5 meters per second, and the 9-inch mark consistently gave me airspeeds over 0.5 meters per second while still showing a good difference between fans that had a good concentrated airflow and ones that did not. Mind you could take the same data points from any of the distances from the fan. It just may look like an utterly flat line in some of these fans in some of these circumstances. So the 9-inch mark was chosen to maintain a high enough airspeed. So what are we seeing? Well, the P12 ARGB basically has no airspeed, no airspeed, no airspeed, no airspeed, and then it finally catches up. Overall, it's not that good in this testing. Pretty unfortunate, actually. It just doesn't climb as steeply as the regular P12 sitting right here in this other non-highlighted orange line. And then we have the ZF Pastel, and it's actually in an even worse category. It's in the bad category. Not my opinion, it's objective, because right here it's at the bottom of the graphs. Better fans are top left, worse fans are bottom right, and noise is horizontal. So it's creating a lot of extra noise for not much improvement in airspeed. And the P12 ARGB is similar, just pushing more air. It's still It's at the very bottom end of like the good, quote, good fans, putting it in kind of this okay category.
Arctic P12 ARGB.
P12 ARGB.
ID Cooling ZF12 025.
Next, we're taking a look at how the fans perform through my CPU air cooler. My cooler is the Noctua U12A. On both these two graphs you're seeing right now, better fans are sitting top left, worse fans are sitting bottom right. And let's take a look at the left side first. This is RPM versus airspeed. Fundamentally, this is just a blade efficiency graph. It is how good is this blade design at shoving air through my CPU air cooler. So we see that the ARGB version of the P12 is sitting here in this yellow line, and it's slightly over the regular P12, except at higher RPM, where the regular P12 is slightly outperforming it. So we got that going on. That's kind of an interesting result. And we have the ZF Pastel in here as well, lining up fairly closely overall. Next, let's take a look at the right side. This is noise versus airspeed. This is how good is the performance at a given noise level. And we see that the ARGB kind of climbs, passes. So it gains a lot of extra airspeed with not that much extra noise. And then it kind of jumps over and matches my control fan relatively closely, except at higher RPMs it gets a bit on the noisy side. The regular P12 is overall outperforming my control fan at most RPMs. The Pastel, on the other hand, is noisy and underperforming here. I know there's a lot going on, so allow me to explain. Yellow circles or bars around things are the two fans for this particular review. The blue ones are other Arctic fans that I wish to kind of highlight, to pull out from this data set so that it was more pointed out. Another explanation is what's going on over here. And we have 210W, that's 210 watts, equals 1.5, and that's 1.5 meters per second. I should have labeled that meter per second. But I did a whole series of tests on my CPU cooler, the U12A, for what wattage equated to what airspeed, letting the CPU go to thermal max, the wattage stabilize at a particular PWM fan signal, took the airspeed reading at the back of the cooler, and then I'd adjust the PWM fan signal down, take the airspeed measurement again, let the wattage stabilize, and record it, and I was able to generate a graph of what airspeed equated to what wattage, give or take about 5 watts. So it's actually pretty interesting data. But this data is only particular to my CPU, the Noctua, or the i7-11700K, and my cooler, the Noctua U12A. So if you don't have either of those, how does this data work for you? Well, you can use it as a comparison's sake. So let's say you have the NF-F12 Redux. It's pushing 0.7 meters per second of air for my noise normalized value of 12 decibels. If you upgrade to the P12, you're now going to be pushing 1.3 meters per second of air for that same noise level, at least on my CPU cooler. So you see that there's a relative performance difference between these two fans. How much extra airspeed you're going to get for your particular cooler, I can't say for certain. So I also don't know how much extra wattage you'd be able to draw. So this is the other comparison point. By upgrading from a lower fan to a higher rated fan, your CPU is going to be able to draw a higher wattage for a given noise level, or if your CPU is locked, you're going to be running your system, or clock speed limited, you're going to be able to run your system cooler for the same noise level, or you're going to take this extra overhead, back off the PWM fan signal a little bit, and our system is going to run quieter for the same original wattage. It's your choice how you use it, but it just gives a general standpoint of where these fans lie in noise normalized results with their airspeed performance through. Now, how do they compare at 100% PWM fan signaling? Well, here's the Pastel. It's actually pretty good, sitting right there in the middle with a 1.9 meters per second of airflow, while the A12X25 is sitting right down here, also pushing 1.9 meters per second of air. Now, these are different 1.9 meters per second of air. There are slight differences between them, and they are ranked in this order for a reason. Again, I do repeat testing, so they average a result out like this. The P12 ARGB is sitting at 1.8 meters per second of air at a functionally the same airspeed as the original P12, though it is noisier and the ARGB is spinning at a faster RPM. So kind of an interesting result there. Again, it is up to you to determine how much performance you actually need for your CPU and how best to use the resources. For the U12A, I could get my CPU up to, what was it, 200 and, oh, it's in the graphs, like 230 watts with two A12X25s blowing and sucking air through the cooler. So that was plenty of performance by boosting things up to a much higher RPM fan. What did I use? The Silentwings 4 Pro, so right here, 2.6. I was only able to get up to 245 watts. If I'm remembering correctly, I could be off on that wattage. So for significantly more noise, I wasn't getting that much more performance. So it's up to you to determine where, like, how much performance is enough performance, because there at some point you're not going to be able to extract much more heat out of the cooling system you're currently using by blowing more air through it. There are just other limiting factors and then there's also wattage to clock speed isn't a linear relationship. It tends to plateau as you reach out of that optimal point within the CPU. So you're both limited there and how much extra cooling you can get out of your cooling system. So between those two factors, it's like it's up to you to determine how much cooling is enough for cooling. And then we have cooler airspeed versus decibels. I'm sorry, I know I'm coughing a lot. Decibel reading is horizontal, airspeed is vertical, and we see that the P12 ARGB gets a lot of extra performance without that much noise early on, and then it plateaus and doesn't really gain that much more later on, while the ZF Pastel tends to be always sitting towards the bottom of the graphs. So once again, it's up to you to determine what's most important. So the ARGB P12 is good at certain RPMs, but overall I would say it's underperforming compared to other fans.
So as near as I can count, I think I counted 12 LED lights, which is more than a lot of other fans that I've actually tested thus far, especially when they're just in the housing itself. So this allows for fairly smooth transitions of colors and better color blending. So as opposed to needing two lights to then blend the color together, you have more lights that will basically shine each light and then it blends together kind of between it and creates a much smoother effect if you're going for this rainbow. Or, well, I think it actually looks better when you have all the lights basically all on the same color. It just creates a much smoother looking light. So stopping the blade for a second, you can see that the RGB lights are sitting right underneath the housing, and there are only 5 blades, but the significant number of RGB lights, LED lights, really just helps illuminate it and create a good overall lighting effect that actually transitions out very nicely. This might actually be one of my favorite looking RGB fans, and just creates a good overall color effect. The amount of light blending, the amount of illumination that it creates, I think it just looks quite excellent with that basic black frame.
Next up, we have CFM testing. So CFM testing, as a lot of other reviewers use it, I don't particularly like, and allow me to explain. So CFM testing is just cubic feet per minute, and it can be in any unit you like. It's just a volume by airspeed, or by a unit of time. So it's calculated. I have a circular tube, but it can be any shaped tube. You just need to know the surface area. So that's pi r squared. Let's put r in feet. Then we have the fan. It is the same size as the tube. we're blowing air down it. We need an anemometer. We measure the airspeed. Let's put it in feet per minute. So feet per minute times feet squared. That becomes feet cubed per minute, cubic feet per minute. Again, it can be in millimeters cubed per second. It can be meters cubed per second. It can be whatever unit is. It's just a volumetric flow rate. So now why don't I like it? Well, you've got this tube, you got the fan. The fan blade diameter is the same diameter as the box that it's put in like 99% of all cases. So what does this mean? A fan that has a tendency to spew air off to the sides won't be able to because the fan diameter matches the size of the tube. That means the air will just all travel down the tube without any air being able to go sideways. But the air is still trying to go sideways, meaning it's now reflecting off the walls to some extent. So that means that the momentum, the total air speed going down the tube, is going to be slower than a equivalent fan that has a good concentrated airflow. So that means that a fan that has a concentrated airflow will tend to have a higher volumetric flow rate than one that doesn't. So that leads you to have the correct results, meaning the correct order of fans, meaning one that has concentrated airflow will tend to outperform one that doesn't. They'll be in the right order, most likely, but for all the wrong reasons. And the two fans could look closer in performance than they actually are, which is why that case simulation test is actually so important. It gives a much stronger indication of which fans get you that airflow through the case, while just putting it in a CFM test really doesn't not. That's not to say that the CFM test like this isn't completely invalid. It just needs to be used properly. So the CFM test like this can be used in a couple key different ways. If you want to generate PQ curves, so that's airspeed versus pressure curves, you would use this type of testing. You would have a variable size slit, you need a couple of pressure sensors, you would need an anemometer to measure the airspeed, and you'd be able to make graphs of how good this fan is in different types of pressure scenarios. I do have a background in computational fluid dynamics, i.e. fluid engineering, because I specialized it with my master's degree in college, and I'm not that many years out of college, but it's something that I have a fundamental knowledge of and interest in and have a background in, and most other reviewers seem to not understand this, that you can't just slap a fan up to a tube and say, this one good, this one bad. But you can also use this sort of testing for making your own at-home wind tunnel, measuring your total volumetric flow rate through your computer case. You need an anemometer for whatever is your exits for your case to measure the airflow going through it, and you'd be able to get a rough estimate of the volumetric flow rate of air traveling through your case, which actually be kind of cool. So that is how you can use it. So it's kind of like case and point. In this testing, we see that the fans pretty much all line up very closely to my control fan. So it's like no surprise. And even my CFM test isn't as accurate as it should be because the tube should be longer to do it more properly. It's again another thing that I'd like to improve about this test. There's only one group out there that does the CFM test like this that I really like, and that's hwcooling.net, and they have a cone-shaped one, so there's room for the fan to expand. And assuming I get a little bit of help funding, sorry I always keep bringing it up, but it's like I'm stuck. I would implement a similar type of test to it, where the cone would be able to fit 180 millimeter class fans and would shrink down, and then I'd have a second cone for 120s down to 80 millimeter class fans. So 120s would be would be a middle category for me, where I'd be able to compare big and small fans kind of against each other. Back to these graphs. Sorry, I'm bouncing a little bit around. But we have noise versus CFM, and then again, this is where we tend to see the fans kind of separate because every fan has a different noise criteria to it, meaning how the manufacturer decided to design their fan for noise results. And we see very similar results, where the P12 Argb and the ZF tend to be underperforming compared to my control fan. Now, how do they compare against other fans? Well, here the Argb is right up there towards the top of the graphs. The Pastel is sort of top middle-ish, so it's overall doing pretty well at these noise normalized results. How about at 100%? Well, the Pastel is doing pretty good. It's towards the upper end of the graphs. Kind of a surprising result. It is amazingly outperforming the A12X25, albeit at a much noisier level. So it is less optimized for noise performance and more optimized for airflow performance. And this is sort of like a case in point of how different manufacturers optimize their fans for different things. And it's up to you to determine what factor is actually most important to you, noise or performance. RGB, no RGB. Where best to spend your budget, basically. The ARGB is sitting right here. It's overall in a pretty good result. It's a little bit behind the A12X25, but overall I'd still put it in a pretty good result category, even though it is technically bottom middle. Next we have CFM versus decibel rating. CFM is vertical, decibel is horizontal, and every 10 decibels is a doubling in noise volume as a reminder. So even if a line looks linear, it is not. It is actually like much more stretched out than what it appears on this graph. So we see that the P12 ARGB starts off pretty poor, but gains a lot of traction, becomes pretty good, and then it flattens out, and it doesn't climb as steadily as many other fans around it, ending up in what I'd put as an okay category, but not a great category. The ZF starts off actually significantly worse, but then kind of catches up, but I'd still put both of these two fans in sort of a not good category. Let's move on. Now we're on to value proposition. The P12 ARGB is a $17 fan, and the ZF Pastel is a $13 fan. So value proposition is a very simple calculation. It's literally performance divided by money. How much? Well, it's in US dollars. So do note that for time of year, sales, events, wherever you live, different fans have different value propositions related to them. This is just based off of standard Amazon pricing that I could find. Well, it's just the standard baseline price of the fan. So they will vary based on your region, and it's very simple to calculate. I gave you all the data that you would need to calculate for your own region at the very beginning of this video, actually. So value proposition is most important for those of you who are on an ultra tight budget. If you are trying to get the absolute best maximum performance out of your computer that you can for the least amount of money, you would pay special attention to value proposition. Value proposition is not absolute performance. It is a relative performance. So you could have a very cheap, very poorly performing fan, and it could look, and you could have a much more expensive but extraordinarily high performing fan, and they could have the same value proposition, or vastly different value propositions. A very highly performing fan that is way too expensive, it would look like it's a very poor value. So it's up to you to determine where on this is most important to you. So if you've got a little bit of extra spending money, I do recommend that you take a look at the early graphs, take a look at the value proposition, and pick out which fan best suits your set of particular needs. Now that all that is said, there isn't that extra category that is not included in this. Again, if you've got a little bit of extra budget, where it would be extra airspeed performance, a little bit better noise performance, a little bit of RGB, a little bit of whatever aesthetic you like. That extra is up to you to determine how important it is to you to fit best on that value curve that you particularly want. Now, on all these graphs, noise normalized results is always going to be on the left side, 100% is always going to be on the right side. First up is the 6-inch mark, and we see that the Pastel is actually sitting well above average. Actually, it's in a really good position. The ARGB is sitting a bit above average, not quite as good in value, so both of them would be actually pretty good buys overall, but they are a far cry from the absolute top value proposition placers, including the Arctic's very own P12. At 100% pitot fan signaling, things are very similar overall. The Pastel is sitting well above average. The ARGB is sitting just maybe a hair above average, so it's overall in an okay position. But the regular P12 and the F12 are well above that. And my top performer here is the TLG12. How are things looking at the 11-inch mark? Well, here is where it falls apart for the Pastel. It just isn't that good of a case fan overall. The 6-inch mark is okay because air hasn't had that much of an opportunity to spread out. So the P12 ARGB is actually sitting in a much better position here overall. It's looking pretty good. It's well above average, in its value proposition. At the 100% pitot fan signaling mark is where the Pastel kind of catches up and is more or less in that average category. The ARGB is just a hair above average, but it's not quite there. If you can find it on sale, it certainly would be much better value. Even a couple bucks off, it would be a much better value proposition because it's already relatively cheap. So how are things looking through the CPU air cooler? Well, the Pastel here is actually looking like really, not really good value, but certainly top value here. The ARGB is sitting well above average as well, but they are still a far cry from my top value proposition. Oh, I wanted to comment. If you're running your case fans at 100% PW fan signaling, something's gone terribly wrong inside your computer, and you probably need to rethink about your cooling solution, i.e. probably your thermal paste. You may have not mounted things properly if your case fans are ramping up that high if they're linked to your CPU cooler airspeed. So back to the CPU cooler. 100%, this does matter a lot for the CPU air cooler. And we do see that the ARGB is sitting a bit above average and the Pastel is sitting well above average, but they're still a far cry from my top value picks in this category. At using the CFM test, both fans are sitting above average, actually in pretty good positions overall, and at 100%, they're still both sitting above average. So then what does this leave me with these fans? Well, the Pastel is pretty good in CPU cooler and in smaller cases. But if you're going to be using it for airflow in a bigger case, I probably wouldn't buy it. There are just other better fans out there unless you really like its aesthetic. It just doesn't quite have the airflow required for a bigger case. For CPU cooler, I do have concerns about it because what this data does not indicate, with the way I'm currently testing things, is clock speed performance. I'm able to estimate it, but the fan diameter is actually a bit smaller than 120 millimeters. Most of these other fans, they try to maximize that blade size, but the Pastel is a little bit on the small side. So do have concerns about absolute performance running through it. Mind, it shouldn't be more than a couple watts, so it's up to you to determine if that's important or not. The ARGB from Arctic is okay, but it's a little bit on the expensive side for the loss in performance that you're actually getting out of it. So I think the RGB on it is good looking. And I also have concerns about Arctic when they're not their reliability, but their quality control. I just have had a number of lemons with them, with the testing that I've done, and ended up getting a second sample that performed more in line with what I would expect. So I feel like if you were to buy, this is where I need to do more testing, buy a dozen fans of the same type, how many of them would be lemons, how many of them wouldn't be, or how many, what would be the middle, the median. So it's hard to account for that, and I also haven't done any reliability testing. It's something that I like to add in the future. But again, I can't devote the time and the resources into doing that while, I mean, I don't know if I'll ever make money off this channel, but I certainly don't want to lose money. So it's not something that I can put my effort into currently, but I'd certainly love to be able to put effort into doing that sort of testing in the future. So let's move on to the, and that brings us to the end of the video. At the end of every video, I do like to show off my raw data. This data does belong to me. However, you are allowed to use it for your own personal use. By that, I mean literally your own personal use. You can type it out into your own Excel chart and be able to calculate your own graphs, your data, your own value propositions as prices of fans change for your own determining factor, rather than needing to review this video every single time. But if you want to use it in any sort of publication, written journal, or video, I do ask that you reference me and my channel and, well, ask my permission. Most likely I'll just go ahead and give it. If you've got suggestions on how I can improve my videos, constructive criticism here, I'm willing to take that. Just note it may take a little bit of time for me to implement it into my videos, since I tend to do a lot of buying at once, and then do a lot of recording at once, and then over the course of, while I'm release cycling, putting the video together basically after I've already recorded everything. So just note that it may take a little bit of time for that to be implemented. If you've got suggestions for me, for fans, for me to take a look at, please leave those in the comment sections down below. I do ask that they be available on Amazon because that's the easiest way for me to acquire them currently. But other than that, I do try to take a look at the fans that you all are interested in, and always trying to acquire more. And other than that, please subscribe. It will really help me grow my channel. Please check out my Patreon page. If you like what I'm doing, you want to see, like I've just told you my goals at the beginning of this video, the improvements that I'd like to make to this channel in the future. If you really want to see it grow and me to be the go-to source for fan testing on the interwebs, please subscribe there. Sign up for the Patreon, because it will actually help me out the most. Otherwise, I'll keep doing what I'm doing, and I hope to see you next time here on Computer Tech and More. Have a great day.